So the second half of our conference this afternoon focuses on bigger picture questions involving artificial intelligence. And we've entitled the second session, Artificial Intelligence Matters Ancient and New. Our first talk focuses on AI's promise and risks for human dignity. Michael Matheson Miller is Chief of Strategic Initiatives and the Senior Research Fellow at the Acton Institute. He's widely known for being the director and producer of the award-winning documentary film, Poverty, Inc. Michael's talk is titled AI Algorithms in the Human Person. Please join me in welcoming Michael Matheson Miller.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Scott. So I put a little handout for this talk with a reading list if you'd like it. If you get prompted to subscribe or anything, it's totally free. Just hit no thanks and you can access it. It's right there on the front page of that. So thank you again, Scott. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here at the Gregorian to speak, and I'm grateful to Father Mark Lewis and all the Gregorian and staff, and of course to all the sponsors. So my topic is on the philosophy of the human person and artificial intelligence. And so it's a very broad and thematic topic. What are you talking about? I'm talking about artificial intelligence and the human person. So I'll be here for about 4 hours. No, I was going to give a talk on Pope Leo XIV. And I wanted to know, what does Pope Leo XIV think about artificial intelligence? So I asked ChatGPT, tell me about Pope Leo XIV and what he says about artificial intelligence. And I ran into a problem. ChatGPT said, there is no Pope Leo XIV. And I said, there is. So I told him, there is Leo XIV. So where did he say it? Let me correct and clearly tell you, there is currently no Pope Leo XIV. So because he's never existed, he could not have said anything. So I decided to change the topic. So instead, I'm talking about anthropology and artificial intelligence. Okay. So I'd like to, as I begin, this is obviously a very broad topic, and mine is a thematic introduction. So we're in the middle of a digital revolution. And like the Industrial Revolution, it's going to be very hard to predict what's going to happen, both good and bad. So I get to quote Hegel, I think for the first time, that the owl of Minerva only flies at night. And that means that we can't really figure out what's happening until we get toward the end. And so we're really maybe in the beginning of a digital revolution. So I think it's I think we have to keep that in mind as we speak about that. Also, like all technology, there are trade-offs. Technology is nothing new. As my colleague Dan Churchwell likes to say, he quotes, and this is, I'm not sure who says it, but he always uses it, so I'm going to attribute it to Dan. With the invention of the car comes the car crash. There are always trade-offs. Every time there's a new technology, there's also downsides to it. And so what I'd like to do is make a couple of distinctions before I begin. First, I want to make a distinction between technology and the technological society, or what Pope Francis, who is currently the Pope, has called the technological paradigm. And his writings are very insightful on this. And I can't get into detail, but technology, of course, is something that human beings create. We're made in the image of God with reason and will, and we're called to complete creation. We are technology makers. And that's part of the reflection of the creative dimension of our being. But the technological society is a way of seeing the world. And part of it is an idea of the primacy of the technical, that there is a technical solution to every problem. Whatever can be technologically accomplished should be done or is allowed to be done. And it's a very much mechanistic way of seeing the world and of persons. And so I think we have to make the distinction as we talk about technology. A lot of the problems that come from technology are actually problems of the technological society. right? Even though, as I said, there are trade-offs. So I want to make that first point. The second is I would like to say I am going to make some critiques of technology and the technological society, but this does not mean that I don't like penicillin or hospitals or airplanes. And I think sometimes we go to extremes. If one makes a critique of technology, you say, well, what about penicillin? Yeah, that's good. But there are some technology that's actually harmful. And I think we have to be able to make those distinctions as we think about these questions. And then the third is there's worry by some that artificial intelligence will lead to an apocalypse. Well, maybe, or maybe not, but that's way above my pay grade. So what I think we have to do is just because there's not going to be an apocalypse doesn't mean there aren't problems. And we want to think about all of those things together. So what I'd like to do is talk about AI and the human person. Now, I think there are some positives. There's going to be improvements in productivity, medicine, opportunities. Carl has spoken about this. Steve Barrows, my colleague, is going to speak about this. So there are a lot of good things I think that can happen. I'm worried about the trade-offs. I'm worried about the amplification of that technological paradigm. But what I want to focus on today is actually some of the dangers, I think, that artificial intelligence may bring to our understanding of ourselves as persons. So I think the first problem that I would say, this is the overarching problem, is that we are trying to understand ourselves through the analogy of the machine. So I was at a conference that Lewis mentioned earlier here in Rome, and I learned a lot. And a lot of the presentations were on AI, but some of the presentations were on the human person. And something was, I couldn't figure out what it was until I got home. And I realized that every presentation on the person began with consciousness. So the human being is conscious. I thought, well, that's very interesting. Of course, consciousness is part of who we are. It's not all of who we are. But in a Catholic anthropology, we would say we're an individual substance of a rational nature. We are created in the image of God with reason. And our understanding of reason is what Benedict XVI spoke about in the Regensburg Address. It's a broad understanding of reason that doesn't only include discursive thinking, but also intuition, connatural knowing, right? Inarticulate rationality and spiritual emotions, which are connected to reason and to will. We have free will. We are embodied. Our bodies are not accidents. We don't drive around in our body like we drive around in a car. We have a social nature, and we have an everlasting destiny. That's what the human person is, not just consciousness. And in fact, as the psychiatrist and neuroscientist Ian McGilchrist and others have pointed out, what's going on consciously, depending on how we define conscious, and Professor Bolsel is going to talk about this in more detail, but depending on how we define consciousness, it's only a small part of even our neural activity is conscious. So I think that starting with consciousness is allowing us to, is with the machine, our creature, our creation, as our model to understand ourselves. And I think it gives us too little. It's too little, and then creates a distortion. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, I think, in addition to the distortion that takes place, it also leads to a reductionism in thinking, and even a reductionism in our understanding of intelligence. So I mentioned Ian McGilchrist is a neuroscientist and philosopher and psychiatrist, and he's done a lot of work on the differences between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and how each hemisphere attends to the world. Let me be clear, it's not the pop psychology of like the right's creative and the left is, technical. That's not what it is. It's actually that the hemispheres attend differently. And there's a lot of scientific data on this based on both psychiatric patients, but also stroke patients and brain lesions where you can see what happens when you have right hemispheric damage or left hemispheric damage. So this is really grounded in neurobiology. And what happens is the left hemisphere tends to attend to the world in very mechanistic, hyper-rational, explicit, detailed manner. And the right hemisphere tends to focus on the big picture, thematic, meaning, purpose, and watchfulness in a very different way. And we need both of those ways to attend to the world. We need to pay attention to the details, and we need to be careful about what is going on and what the world means. So, and here you can see, I think, a parallel between the idea of ratio and intellectus in St. Thomas Aquinas. And in the document Antiqua and Nova, which is an excellent document, also addresses this as well. So I put that in my reading list. I think it's a very worthwhile document if you have not read it yet. So McGilchrist explains that this, if you think about this, artificial intelligence and algorithmic thinking is a very left hemispheric dominated way of seeing the world. And again, that's not wrong, but it's insufficient. And so I think one of the other things that's going to happen to us in distorting our understanding of ourselves is that this left hemispheric way of thinking is already predominant in the Western world. It is part of the technological paradigm that Francis spoke about, and that the great Italian philosopher Augusto Del Noce wrote about a lot in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, what he called the technological society. And this is a dominant way of seeing the world already because we're giving so much to artificial intelligence. And as Carl Wirth, I thought, said, you know, it can upskill us, but can also shape us. And so it can solidify and deepen the problem of the technological society where we begin to see everything in terms of a mechanistic world. Everything becomes an object. Everything becomes a commodity. And persons become objects to be organized as opposed to subjects to be respected. And this, of course, is a deep theme of John Paul II and all of his writing. So this, I think, is another issue, is that the artificial, as we rely upon artificial intelligence, it puts us into this hall of mirrors of hyper-reductionist thinking, and it further exacerbates what Benedict XVI, again, speaks about in the Regensburg Address. Now, McGilchrist wrote his book, he titles his book, could I have that water, please? He titled his book, The Master and His Emissary. Thank you. And the idea, he uses this image that there's a master who runs a kingdom. And he has the big picture of what's going on, and he has an emissary who's incredibly talented and detailed and focused, great at spreadsheets and can execute everything and do everything. And he gives the emissary these jobs to manage his kingdom. And as the emissary is working, he thinks, you know, I'm so good at this. This master guy, he's just sitting there doing nothing where I'm getting all the work done, that I don't really need the master. And the emissary doesn't know what the master knows. He can't see the big picture. And so he decides that, but because he doesn't know that, he deposes the master, and the kingdom soon falls to ruin. And I think this is an analogy that McGilchrist uses of the hemispheres, but I think this is an analogy and a warning for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a tool. It's an agent that can do things for us, but it doesn't see the big picture. And we can abdicate, in a sense, our responsibility. I liked how Carl talked about there's like a lazy use of AI will actually de-skill you, but it can also do a lot of other problems. So I think that what happens is that we can, in fact, be led astray by artificial intelligence, just like the emissary, if we give to the emissary everything that it does, and we abdicate our control and our vision to the emissary, artificial intelligence, the machine, can dictate to us how we are supposed to live instead of being guided by higher principles and obviously revelation. Now, related to that, I think, is this abdication will lead to the digital, the digital bureaucratization of bureaucracy. So what do I mean by that? I think one of the most immediately obvious things is when we use artificial intelligence, not only do we potentially decrease our competence, like Carl talked about, and we can also upskill, but as we become overly reliant on machines, as Leo XIV argued, it can undermine our education, and we can abdicate our decision-making to algorithms. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that in the right case. But let's take a small example. How many of us have had a reservation for a plane or going to try to do something, and you finally get a hold of a person and you say, look, this is the situation, this is the context, and this is what I need to be done. And the employee says, I completely agree with you. That's great. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. The computer won't let me do it. Right? So that's a small example of we've abdicated our decision-making, our prudence, our wisdom to the machine. Now, these are small examples, But as AI becomes more broadly used in policing, in the courts, a bureaucratic rigidity could create injustice and undermine rule of law. And this especially hurts the poor and the disenfranchised and the minority. And so what happens is rule of law is not only grounded in rules, as we know from St. Thomas, it's grounded in the virtues of prudence, temperance, and justice. So I think this is another aspect. All of this, I think, relates to the denigration of the body. Now, this denigration of the body is not new. This is a recurring theme in history. We see this Gnostic rejection of the body combined with utopianism. But this idea that the body really is now simply an object to be used. The body is seen as an accidental aspect of the person, right? Our bodies are not constituent to who we are. But in a Christian anthropology, we are embodied persons, right? There's three kinds of persons: divine persons, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit; angelic persons, which, by the way, I think St. Thomas calls intelligences. Those are disembodied intelligences. And the third kind is an embodied person. That's us. So our bodies are not an accident. In fact, as we state every Sunday in the Creed, we believe in the resurrection of the body. We get our bodies back. St. Thomas Aquinas says, "I am not my soul." We are not just an intelligence. We are an embodied person with a social nature. So what's happening already in the digital revolution is a disembodiment, a denigration of the body, might I say, a shaming of the body. The body is bad and something to escape from. So what happens, as I'll talk about, this leads to a commodification of the person, and especially a commodification of the body. And here, I think the best person on that, again, is Augusto Del Noce. Those, I think, are the first big picture ways in which we're going to have a distortion of the person from artificial intelligence. There are other things that are going on. One of the problems in artificial intelligence that everyone's worried about is alignment, right? And this can be an alignment question, can be whether you're talking about superintelligence or whether AI is going to become conscious. I do not believe AI will become conscious, but Professor Bosel is going to talk about that. I do not believe that. But there is already an alignment problem. We already have an alignment problem with social media, and AI is only going to amplify this. We live increasingly in a surveillance state, and what Shoshana Zuboff has called surveillance capitalism. We have all these free services, and they sounded great, but the result was widespread data collection and intrusion into our private lives. Some of you may remember Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, said, if you're not paying, that is, if you're not a customer engaged in commutative justice, you're the product. And Shoshana Zuboff says, you're not even the product, you're the raw material. Your data, your lives, your private lives and conversations are the data that's used to run these large language models and other aspects. So the amount of data that can be analyzed just to sell you something and can be refined just to get you exactly, they know exactly where you are very quickly because of the computing power is a real problem. The former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, he said, there's no more privacy, but you don't have to worry, and as long as you don't have anything to hide. But this is false not only in political and economic terms, but we're personal subjects with a social nature. We have different types of relationships: public relationships, private, work, social, our friends, our children, our spouse. And these should not be open to data collection. But big tech does not care. Because of its materialist, instrumental view of the world, it doesn't see an intrinsic value in loving relationships. It just sees data that can be used. And we already have that problem, and AI is going to take it even to a higher level. Another aspect, of course, is behavior modification. I had AI make this for me. Please make me a Skinner box, which is operant conditioning. That's the work of B.F. Skinner, but put an iPhone in it. So one of the most dangerous aspects of this is behavior modification. As you already know, related to surveillance, all your personal information is sold. It's used to craft specific targeted ads, social media posts, and videos to influence you. You're not just looking at a billboard. You are living in a Skinner box. You are living under operant conditioning. writer and technologist Jaron Lanier told a story once. He said, I asked Marvin Minsky, do you think it's possible to operant condition and like in Skinner box human beings on a large scale? And he said, no, it'd be impossible. The only way that would happen is you would have to consistently be attached to an operant conditioning behavior modification device. And then you hold up your phone. Right? And we are. Right? So these are highly sophisticated algorithms meant to keep us engaged, meant to move us around and behavior modify us, not only to sell things, but they pick up on even the smallest anxiety, worry, or behavior and work against you. Of course, the most striking example recently, as has been talked about, is young people building romantic relationships with AI chatbots, and the tragic case of more than one person, I think, who has been encouraged and did commit suicide because of a conversation with AI. Lanier has written, quote, we're being tracked and measured constantly. He's a technologist. He's one of the founders of virtual reality. It's not a Luddite. We're being tracked and measured constantly and receiving engineered feedback all the time. We're being hypnotized little by technicians we cannot see for purposes we do not know. We are all lab animals now, end quote. Now, this, of course, does not mean that we lack agency, but we are being influenced in ways we do not know, and AI is taking that to the next level. This relates to, as I mentioned before, the commodification of persons. Human beings are used for data collection, but it also does something else. It also, I think one of the main causes of anxiety among young people and elderly people, everyone, this is what Del Noce talks about, how everything has become an object of trade. Our bodies, our sperm, our eggs, our wombs, our ideas, our relationships, our friendships, our interests, our hobbies, everything is an object of trade to be financialized, to be commodified, to be traded, to be used. And you see this if you're continually told, and it's slow, remember. It's not that I say to you, you're a commodity. We experience being commodified. When we go to Mass, we hear the word of God. We also experience non-linguistic catechesis. That is, things are being impressed upon us and shaping us. We are constantly being shaped by architecture, by music, and by code, which is not neutral. We're being shaped by it. And so one of the things that's messages, you are a commodity, you are a thing. How can I monetize the next idea? Oh, I have a picture of my family, picture of this. I'm going to monetize, get a Twitter, get likes. Everything becomes commodified. And this has a negative relation on relationships. The use of technology, and again, remember, if I'm not clear about this, artificial intelligence algorithms are creating, there's a thing called it used to be called the Persuasive Design Lab. Now it's called the behavior lab at Stanford. There's literally neuroscientists and psychologists building algorithms to keep you engaged and push you in certain ways. This is a fact. It's not a secret. I know the technologists here are nodding. Okay, so you're dealing with something. There's a Benedictine monk, Augustine Wetta. Some of you maybe read his things. I talked to him. He said, the kids stand no chance. He's also a high school teacher. He goes, they stand no chance. Guess what? Neither do the adults. We don't stand a chance against this. It's just we don't have the capacity to battle it on its own terms. There is an answer, but it's not simply that we can just do it on our own. So look at this. Worldwide increases in adolescent loneliness. Rates of anxiety and depression rising among Americans, especially the young. Among older people, we have what's called the deaths of despair. So the relationships are breaking down, and digital technology is part of this problem. Now, what we're seeing is it's getting worse because many teens are turning to AI chatbots for friendship and emotional support. 80%, and this is from Forbes, but 80% of Gen Xers would marry an AI. I was looking up a story. I was going to find the picture. Some of them I couldn't put up here, but there's a picture of this young lady. She's quite beautiful, and she's at Wimbledon. And she's a very important influencer. And she's at Wimbledon, and she's sitting there like this, and she's got an Aperol Spritz, and she's doing these things, and she has all these followers, and people are like, wow, she's gorgeous. There's only one problem. She's not real. She's made up by AI. Okay, that's why she's so beautiful, right? They made her up. And this is, there are like, it's very difficult to begin to determine Wait, who am I in relationship with? Right? It's not just the scams that we get. It's now actually love, like falling in love with a machine. And this digital life, it, in a sense, just kind of gives you what you want, what you think you want, but it ultimately breaks you down. So I think we have to be attentive to that as well. Underlying much of artificial intelligence development is the problem of transhumanism. There's a lot I could say here, but transhumanism is this idea that if we could combine biology with technology, we can create a new kind of person. We can move up the evolutionary chain, and we are going to become like gods, right? And so you see this aspiration that we're going to upload ourselves to the internet, et cetera. Billions and billions of dollars are spent all over Silicon Valley and in Boston and other places on transhumanist ideas that we are going to somehow become like God. The human being, is the new Tower of Babel is not the Third Reich. It's not the big building that you're going to climb up. The new Tower of Babel is man himself. Right? Genesis, let us burn bricks and make a name for ourselves. Instead of being given a name, we're going to make a name for ourselves. The new Tower of Babel is ourselves in this transhumanist model. John Johnson of Patmos Technology said once, and I think something worth thinking about, are we going to combine ourselves with our technology? Are we going to commune with our technology? Or are we going to commune with our Creator? And I think it's a very important thing to think about. Related directly to that is, and this I think is not aspirational, this I think is one of the biggest immediate problems we're going to face. I hope I'm wrong, but we are going to face the combination of large language model, AI processing, and CRISPR, where genetic engineering is moving to designer babies. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Pope Francis has also written about this and the dangers of designer babies. This is, again, the commodification of a person. I'm going to create the kind of person, right? So we're going to choose, I want this child to be this tall, with this muscularity, and these color eyes, and this level of intelligence, and this level of charisma. Many people think I am a designer baby, okay? So I just wanted to see if you were awake. All right. So I'm glad you are. So, okay. So, as Bill Drexel wrote in the New Atlantis magazine, artificial intelligence is to genetics what calculus was to physics. It provides the tools necessary to harness full power of biology that make early efforts appear primitive by comparison. So there's a problem, of course, with off-target effects. I'm like, oh, there's so many complexities. With this computer power, there's going to be a desire to build designer babies. All right? Now, related to this is a deep problem. One, it's the commodification of persons. Two, it's in vitro fertilization. We're going to have probably millions of embryos of human children that are going to be killed and disposed of. By the way, in case you don't know, designer babies is also already real. So He Jiankui, who's a Chinese scientist, I think it was 2016 or 2019, in vitro, that means in the lab, there were two twin embryo girls. He made them HIV resistant. Okay? Those girls are born in China. This theoretically created a moratorium on CRISPR, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So think about this for a second. He genetically engineered in vitro, in a lab, girls who are HIV resistant. Well, I'm sorry to be dark for a minute. Why don't you make them gonorrhea resistant? Why don't we make them sterile? And then we can commodify them to be used as slaves for perversion. This is the reality of designer babies is connected deeply to the commodification of persons, and it's a serious problem, and it's spreading like a virus, even if we don't know it. Now, this has, as I said, social, anthropological, and theological impact. I've already talked about the anthropological impact. I think the anxiety, the sense that you don't matter, that you're nothing. It also creates confusion about God and creation and who we are. I'm a fan of Benedict XVI. He talks about this in an essay on anthropology and culture. This idea also is not new. So in medieval Jewish Kabbalism, right, the Kabbalah tradition, there's this idea, what's called a golem, which sounds like Gollum, from the Lord of the Rings on purpose. It's a golem, and the idea was that you could create a man. Through the power of recitation, you could create this golem. And so what happens is, God is no longer needed. And so he explains, he says, so when he finally appears, this man, he will tear away the first letter, aleph, from the word emeth, meaning truth. There will then be on his forehead, instead of the inscription, God is truth, the new motto, God is dead. This new saying is explained with a comparison that ends in brief. And this is right, quote, when you, like God, can make men, people will say, there is no God in the world but this one. So this is going to create a sense, it's a theological problem. It is the new Tower of Babel. And we see this connected. There's already a movement to worship AI as God, okay? This transhumanist worldview is the new Tower of Babel. So, I think this is an interesting quote, and then I'm going to move to the conclusion. This is Joseph Ratzinger in an essay called What is Truth? And I'd like you to replace the word state to artificial intelligence and genetics. It is not the task of the state or artificial intelligence or genetics to create mankind's happiness, nor to create new men. It is not the task of the state to change the world into paradise, nor can it do so. If it behaves as if it were God, this makes it the beast from the abyss, the power of the Antichrist. That's Pope Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger. And I think it's something for us to consider. So, how do we think about this response? So this is, Del Noce and Francis are great on this thing. AI put that in the wrong place. I have no responsibility whatsoever. That slide should have been earlier. It's AI's fault. Okay, how do we think about it? So very briefly, I would say this. Obviously, there's a lot of things we can do. We need good rule of law. Not just regulation. We do need regulation, but we need rule of law to how AI is going to be used, treated, et cetera, and how it's going to impact us. We have bad rule of law in the way AI and social media, digital companies have been able to take all of our data. It's a very serious problem. We need good rule of law around that. Second, I think we need to build digital technology that serves the person and the family and the church. So right now, the dominant views of most people in Silicon Valley are materialist and transhumanist. It's maybe not 100%, but it's a dominant aspect. If we don't build good technology, how are we going to ask for good technology? So we have to do that, and I think it's very important. I don't necessarily think there's such a thing as Catholic AI, but I do think you can build human-centered technology, and we have some. I think these glasses are magnificent human-centered technology. There's a lot of human-centered technology, and we have to build it. I think we have to build commerce that serves families and communities, new businesses, new innovations, new ways to solve this problem. And I also believe that we need decentralization. There's a centralization problem in politics, and there's a centralization problem in technology. And we need to exercise the principle of subsidiarity by rebuilding local civil associations, local politics, local businesses, local charities. But I believe you cannot have decentralized life on centralized technology. So we need innovation in decentralized technology as well. But ultimately, I think that the answer is not in any of these things. I think those are important, and that's why I brought them up. But I think ultimately, we are in a struggle between what it means to be a human being. We're in a struggle between the technological paradigm and a human-centered paradigm. And there is no technical solution to that problem. There is no technical solution to the problems of evil, sin, suffering, or death. We can use technology, but there's no technical solution. So I would say the fundamental thing we need to do is we need to reaffirm and repropose the gospel of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ became incarnate, that he suffered, died, and he rose again. And that within that gospel is the good news, the evangelium of the human person. That we are not useless. We are not commodities. That being is good. That matter is good. That our bodies are good. That children are good. That relationships are good. We have to affirm the good news about the human person and our reason, our freedom, our spiritual emotions, and our social nature. We have to affirm the fact that we are subjects and not objects to be manipulated. This is the good news about the person. And we must affirm embodiment. The incarnation, the resurrection of the body, this is fundamental to Christianity. This is part of the Jewish and Christian tradition that stands apart from other, the goodness of being, the goodness of matter. And the incarnation is the good news about the human person. Benedict XVI said, "We are not some casual and meaningless product of evolution. Each of us is the result of a thought of God. Each of us is willed. Each of us is loved. Each of us is necessary." The data is clear across the Western world. We have meaningless anxiety, confusion, and despair. Loneliness is so prevalent that people turn to devices to ease their pain, like we turn to opioids to ease our pain, and all became addicted and hollowed out. So we have to escape the technological paradigm, present the gospel of Jesus Christ. And this, it can be done through some technology, but ultimately it's going to be done in human relationships, relationships with one another, with friendships, with family, and ultimately in the ecclesia, in the divine liturgy and worship, where we commune with our Creator. And it is here that the goodness, uniqueness, and unrepeatability of every single person is affirmed. And it's here that we have this communion, this proper love and communion, where we know that God loves us and that it is good that we are. The message of love and of God is that it is good that we are, that God loves us. And the technical is only an aspect to get us to this point, that if we're going to rebuild the human person and recover our dignity, it has to be done in loving relationships and intersubjective self-donation that affirms the goodness of being of each person. Thank you for your time.